welcome back to another commentary episode. This time it's going to be on Princess of Darkness, which, for those of you keeping score, this is the 6th episode. Obviously, I'm not keeping score, but, yeah, so we're skipping the Lock's Grove episodes because I don't really have a whole lot to say about them. I was never very happy with how those turned out, but they basically were just filmed, like, in one evening, and there was no script beforehand. It was my attempt at doing kind of more just, like, reality, like let's go out, film, and see what happens kind of content, which I'm not a fan of. I prefer to do these more, like, scripted, plot-based episodes. But Princess of Darkness was my attempt at doing a vampire film, and I'm ultimately very satisfied with this film. However, this is a very cut-down version of what was originally going to happen. And I'll get into all of that stuff as we watch the movie. But yeah, so we're skipping 4 and 5. We're on episode 6 now. I guess there's not really much to do except let's give a good audio syncing clap. Okay. Let's begin. So, opening scene of the film here, we've got there was a big storm. This was actually Hurricane Derecho, if anybody remembers that. It was like a hurricane that was in like the middle of Iowa, or they called it Hurricane Derecho. But I was at home at the time. I was watching Roman Polanski's Repulsion. I had got the Criterion collection of that and never seen it. So I was watching that, and then, fuck Roman Polanski. Completely unrelated, but I was watching that, and then this storm happened, and I'm like, shit, I could film this and just put this in the movie. And I filmed this like a month prior to doing anything else with the vampire film. So, yeah, I thought it looked kind of nice, and it was pretty rabid looking. All of the music in this film, with the exception of the ending song, which is Gravediggers with a Z, is Burn in Hell, which I got from the Satanic Rites of Dracula CD. All of the music was done by my friend Dylan, who his stage name would be Nayad Moonchild, who appears in this film, and he does the music for like almost every other episode of the show as well, with the exception of just a few tracks here and there. But this one was entirely him, and I really loved the very dark, atmospheric sound that he brought to this movie. And from the very beginning, I knew I wanted him in it as the vampire expert. I knew I wanted my friend Emma here as the vampire, and I wanted him to do the music for it. Those were the three things that never changed about the movie, and if I was like, if I can't have one of those three things, then we're just not even going to do this project the way that it was intended, because I've always wanted to do a vampire thing, but I'm very picky about my vampire stuff, and I have a very particular idea of what a vampire is, and I do not like to deviate from that. So, or I should say I have a very broad spectrum of what I think they are, but if they deviate from anything in that area, I'm like, no, it's not a vampire. So, my version of vampires is, I would prefer them to be evil. I know that they would, or at least I demand that they have to drink human blood to survive, whether they like to or not. I want them to be very goth, very, punk rock almost, no matter what time period they're in. I like that aesthetic to them. Like, even Dracula has a very goth aesthetic, even though he's in, like, the fucking 1700s or whatever. So, and I like the satanic imagery. All of these paintings and things were things that Emma just actually had. And I loved them, one, just because I think she's a beautiful painter, but I also think that they kind of influence who the character is, and you can tell a little bit about her just from looking at the things in her room. At least that's how I looked at it. Some people thought that looking at the paintings was boring. This was one movie that was very personal for me, so like whenever I heard kind of criticisms like, oh, this opening scene's kind of boring, I was just kind of like, suck a dick. I don't know. Like, I hate to be like that, but I liked the way it was. Like, you can see that she's into magic, and she's a normal person, but she also does all this kind of very bizarre artwork, which these are things that she just actually has in her house, and I thought they were so fucking cool. And I was like, I have to film these. And like, the character of Serena, I based heavily off of who Emma is as a person. I mean, obviously Emma isn't a vampire and doesn't kill people, but just that very artistic and very individualistic attitude, and like she's very strong-willed and hard-headed, and I love that about her as a person, and I wanted that as the vampire because I really wanted to work with Emma on a project just because we get along so well, and this character I wrote specifically with her in mind. Like I never would have let anybody else do this part. Um, yeah, and then the guitar thing, Emma legit was like trying to play guitar, and I'm like, if she's a vampire and she's like immortal, wouldn't she be trying to take up like other hobbies? So I just thought it was kind of cool to show her like struggling with that. And then a vampire playing Dark Souls, which one Emma likes Dark Souls, but like to give up on like doing the guitar thing and just go to playing video games, like something way more menial. I just felt like was a super relatable thing, and I wanted the vampire to come off relatable. Um, so the subliminal flashing of the dead body, it was supposed to both represent the guilt and also like this was just some public domain decomposition stuff. But this whole scene was supposed to represent the guilt she feels and also the gradual like internal rotting that's happening when she's not feeding on blood. This part is in black and white, one, because I thought it was beautiful to look at in black and white, and two, because she's getting closer to needing to feed again. So the more black and white it gets, the closer she is to death, and the more colorful it is, the more alive she feels. It's kind of how I was trying to go for it. I understand it's a very superficial thing, but that was what I wanted. This is my friend Mason. This was the first thing we filmed for like the whole movie, but it's her seducing him, and I wanted the vampire to use very like almost kind of 90s thing, because that was like how Monica Lewinsky seduced Bill Clinton, was she showed him her thong, and then that obviously worked. So I wanted all of the men to get killed by the vampire, which she exclusively kills men. I wanted them to like kind of almost fall victim to their own like maleness, if that makes any sense. I didn't want it to be like an anti-men movie, but since she's the main character, I wanted to kind of tell it from her perspective and how they're so easily led on a string and carrot, you know? Carrot on a string. So, and like, he's just so blith to the fact that she's obviously not normal. Obviously, this isn't nighttime, but it's dusk. And the thing about my vampire that I don't make abundantly clear is that she can't be killed by sunlight. She just would prefer not to be in it. So it wasn't like I was trying to pretend that this was nighttime. This is obviously still daytime, but this was just like I wanted it to make it seem like it was just about nighttime. But this was actually filmed on a very, very sunny, very, very hot day. All three of us were sweating very badly. There was wasps everywhere. I fucking hated it. Her smoking the cigarette after every kill, I just felt like was something like I'd always see like family members that smoke. If they just did something like really stressful that they didn't want to do, they'd start smoking afterwards. So now we're about 6 minutes and 40 seconds in, and there was no Dante Graves until now, because I wanted to really emphasize that Dante is almost the villain of this story, because you're seeing it from the vampire's perspective, and from her perspective, Dante is just some asshole that's like just butting into her life trying to kill her for just her going about her normal business. And like, it's not like she's killing people because she wants to. She's killing people because she has to. So I wanted it to seem like Dante is almost just kind of like this asshole that has no idea what the hell is going on and doesn't care to know what's going on. Barry's just here for Dante to have someone to talk to and to give him the case. So, like, Barry has a role in the story. But I really wanted to put most of the blame on Dante as a character. I wanted him to feel the most dislikable in this episode. And when we do, I would like to do more of these vampire films, and I want that to be a running theme, is that Dante is always, like, consistently unwilling to learn or empathize with the things that he hunts. Because if he was, it would make his job a lot harder, which we'll get into in another episode. But, yeah, so I wanted the vampire to seem like the most sympathetic. This was the one scene that I actually wrote, like, scripted, and we practiced the lines and did the lines, and I'm really happy with how it turned out, so I think I should do that more often, because a lot of Dante Graves Show stuff is just improv.
You can't just roll up on a sucky and expect things to go smoothly, okay? Did you say sucky?
This was being filmed, so, like, this movie was filmed in, like, 2 days, because initially this was going to be way longer. It was going to be around 50 minutes, if my calculations were correct, because the vampire was going to have a bunch of sex slaves, because the idea was that she was, like, a female Dracula, And I didn't want to just cop out and be like, oh, well, she's got brides and she's a lesbian because, ooh, you know, sexy lesbian vampires. I wanted it to be like, well, if we're going to objectify, if Dracula is objectifying women by having a bunch of brides, then she should objectify men by having a bunch of male sex slaves. I thought that would be a fun idea. So they were going to be a bunch of guys like in tidy whities with like a collar around their neck and like some gimp masks, and they would all be like quasi vampires that would just do her bidding. And it was to give Dante and Barry some people to fight before they had to get to the vampire. And it was this whole thing. And then Emma had some personal stuff come up, so we didn't end up doing that. And it was like 1 week that she was like, okay, I can give you this week to do this stuff. I was like, okay. Because we had filmed the thing with Mason. Months passed without any progress being made on this movie, and I was just doing other shit. Because Dante After Dark, at this point, had already been filmed, and I just couldn't release it because there was a plot point in this one that needed to happen first, which I'll get to. But the conversation at the table, all of the stuff past this point was all filmed in like one night. Even the beginning of the movie with Emma, with Serena smoking the cigarette after killing the guy in the woods, and then her at her house and stuff afterwards, that was literally all within like one day, just filmed backwards from day into night. And I just shoved the whole thing together and it became this like 20-minute plus something movie. This was my good friend Dylan. We worked at JCD and Hobby together. That's how we met. And he was really into music and really into like kind of like that vampire spellcaster fantasy horror subgenre. And I obviously love that shit. So I'd been pitching him this idea for months, and then this was filmed like I had like 2 days left before I was like leaving that job. So it was a really kind of like a melancholy, bittersweet vibe to be like hanging out outside of work and filming this, but it was really, really fun. This was actually his studio for his band, because he is in a band. It's called Violets Embrace. Well, he has his own musical project called Violets Embrace, which is what I credit as doing this music. But he's also in a really cool band. It's a black metal band called Agranex, and he does a lot of other musical projects. Like, he's really a jack of all trades when it comes to music. So check his shit out. I always leave links and stuff like that for you to look into it. But yeah, Nayad Moonchild, Violets Embrace. He's got a YouTube channel called Nayad's Domain. I can't plug the guy enough. But yeah, this was just like what his place looked like. The other thing he added was that table with the pentagram deal. Like, he just brought that shit from home because he's really into this stuff, and he had stuff already laying around. And this scene I had written the dialogue for, lost the dialogue, and then made the dialogue up while we were there. And Dylan is not as seasoned as we are at just bullshitting dialogue. So we really just had to like make shit up and tell him, and he'd have to memorize it like on the fly, and he did really good for the constrictions that I was putting him on. Yeah, I thought it was cool. The little like yellowness of this, it was weird because I think his cymbals on his drums were reflecting the light and fucking with my camera, and everyone was thinking the camera was broken, but the second we got out of this room it wasn't doing it anymore. So I apologize that the footage looks like this, but I mean it's just run and gun filmmaking, so like you can't really, some stuff you just can't help. But yeah, I wanted Dante to have all sorts of different like consultants to show this like network of people that follow the supernatural. So for instance, he has Blair when it comes to like ghosts and stuff, and she appeared in the Lox Grove episodes. Barry is kind of like more of his like true crime consultant, whether he wants to be or not. And there's other people that will pop up here and there, but there's just this like system of people that he can contact. The gun, the musket that Dante and Barry steal is laying right next to them on that table. And at a certain point, it just vanishes from that table. Behind Dylan there's that musket there. That is a different one than they end up actually stealing. And I guess it's not a huge spoiler because this is more like paratext. It's not actually said in canon yet. But that gun that he is holding is the real one. The one they steal is a fake one. So that might clue you in as to what could possibly happen down the line in the Dante Graves show. Yeah, the Axe of Gladamore was just this axe he had laying around, and I love the idea of all these like mystical weapons the only tools that can be used to kill certain monsters, and I thought that was really cool. So, like, if Dante needs a particular weapon for a particular case, he's got all these people he can go to who have these like very special weapons. Yeah, now you see Dante's holding it. Granted, Barry's the one that ends up taking it, but I guess you just kind of infer at some point he must have passed it to him during this conversation. Yeah, and I liked the idea of... We were initially going to make Nayed appear way more, like, almost delusional, or more of, like, a loser. Like, he was going to live at his grandparents' house and work at a grocery store and just do this part-time and had never actually seen vampires. So we ended up just changing it so that he's just never actually interacted with vampires, but he knows quite a bit, because we don't really go into his backstory a whole lot. But we might eventually, because I like the character so much, and he did a really good job. And also, I mean, his biggest contribution to it, it's funny that he plays the harp, because his biggest contribution to the Dante Grave Show as a whole is the music that we use, because it's fucking awesome. This was filmed just right after we walked out. Dagan was doing the camera for like basically the entirety of this movie. So yeah, the syringe of adrenaline was both a Pulp Fiction reference, and it was also to set up in Dante After Dark where Dante gets that needle to save Barbara from the poison. But yeah, this was all just made up on the fly, and I just cut out the bits I don't like. It's real easy. I think more people could make movies if they just didn't have to write a script, which I don't condone doing that, because you end up getting shittier products from it. But like, for me personally, it's very easy to go out there and just slap some shit together, because I have a crew of really supportive people. Granted, the final product is not as good as something when you have a lot of prior proper planning, but the thing is, with the Dante Grave Show being like a spontaneous, almost like quasi-faux reality supernatural show, ghost hunting type show, the more like jovial, like laid back dialogue tone I think fits the show a little bit better than if I was to go through and script everything, and that would just take way too long, and too many people would be unwilling to show up and do things. So I just got to be more efficient, so things like this work for me better. And a lot of this film was filmed at night, which I know a lot of people said it was too dark. Again, I really hate to just shit on people's criticisms, because I really appreciate more criticisms. But I watched this on a big-ass TV with the lights turned off, and I could see it perfectly fine. And I'm like, it's at night, it's going to be a little bit dark. The picture of that Steve Meister was looking at on his phone, I wish Dagan would have had this part in focus. It's so fucking basic. This was back when I was first trying to teach him about manual focus, and you can see he has it in focus now, but like, it was just certain things like that become issues. But okay, Steve Meister had that photo. That was actually not Emma. Emma did not want to show a picture of herself like that for him to like zoom in like that, so she just like looked online and cropped a girl's face out of some random photo, and I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. This was the Dare County Fairgrounds, which was also used in the Rotting Corpse of Jack Carver episode. The idea of pouring holy water on bullets was just something I'd always thought. I know some fucking idiot tried to tell me that the bullets wouldn't fire if you got them wet. I'm like, this is not 1556, okay, Columbus. Like, you don't fucking... It's not like there's gunpowder that's going to get wet. Most firearms nowadays... Everyone thinks they're a fucking firearm expert because they play Call of Duty or some shit. Most firearms nowadays have a built-in oxidizer. So it's not... And if you get it wet, it doesn't really affect anything. Like, it might muffle your shot, but it's not going to affect the veracity that the bullet is going to come out at. So, like, it's just... my terminology is probably off, but if you're a gun person, which I'm not like a diehard gun enthusiast, I'm just like... I know a little bit about guns, and I know enough to know that if you get a gun wet, it's not like, oh, gun won't ever fire or shit. So pouring holy water on your bullets, whether or not it would hurt a vampire more, I can't say, I can't speak to that, but in my universe it does. But the people who were bitching about that, I'm like, you're a fucking idiot and you do not know anything about guns, so just shut the fuck up. This thing about Steve Meister... He's like the epitome of all of the guys that I was trying to depict in this. Just like these douchey objectifiers. And Serena is like the Fatal Attraction type thing. Like the succubus. But I wanted her to be less like the audience was ogling at her for sex appeal. Like that's obviously in there. But I wanted it to be more like she's just weaponizing that against them. So we're not like showing it for the audience to be into. It's more for, like, just the part of the story is that's how she lures men in. So I tried to be as, like, I guess, chill about that stuff as possible. I didn't want it to seem like we were just overtly sexualizing the vampire just for doing it. I wanted it to have a point. So I tried to write the scenes to be more just implied that that was going on. This part I really like because it's just some time to kind of build atmosphere. Like nothing quite happens. It's just him walking from one end of the shed to the other. But sometimes it's nice to just breathe for a minute, and just seeing Dante kind of like search for a vampire with that music going. Which, like I said, Dylan's music really carries this movie. If it didn't have that, this would be a middle of the road episode at best. But I love that not every Dante Graves encounter with the villains has to be a test of strength or a fist fight or something like that. Sometimes it could be a simple game of hide and seek, or a chase, or a shootout. Like, it doesn't really matter. Yeah. This is also the first time, I believe, that we get to see Dante's true gun, the gun that he used in the books, and the gun that he is like his primary weapon of choice, the Snub-Nose 38 Special, which this gun is an airsoft gun, so it's a little bit larger than an actual Snub-Nose 38 Special, but that's what the gun is supposed to be. That's his primary weapon. So this is the first movie where we actually get to see him using that. Yeah, this scene right here, it was going to be just she hits my head against there once, but I wasn't satisfied with it, so I did it 3 times, and then when I was editing, I'm like, it almost looks good if I just layer them together so you can just see all 3 hits, and that was very satisfying. And I did not want Dante to trade blows with the vampire, because I'm like, if it's a vampire, she would just kick his ass immediately, if she's got super strength and shit. I perceive vampires to have super strength. So, I didn't want to, like, belay the point. I'm like, no. She fights, he's outmatched, she runs away. Because it was all supposed to be that she's not, like, trying to kill either one of them if she doesn't have to. It's more just, like, she'll kill them if she needs to, but she would rather just incapacitate them and get away for them to leave her alone. So, like I said, I wanted her to appear more as the hero of this story. Not the hero, but the protagonist. And she overpowers both Dante and Barry. It's only their little bullshit tag team strategy that actually is able to let them overcome her in this. If it wasn't for that, she would have killed the both of them. If she really wanted to, she could have done that. So I liked that idea that they were not in control of the situation. By this point in the night, it was like 2 in the morning, and everyone was just so tired, because like I said, we filmed this in like this giant marathon. And yeah, like I said, it's black and white. I know it's a bit avant-garde to do some coloration fuckery, but like I just liked that kind of motif throughout the movie. And also it's just a nice reference to the fact that there's so many vampire films that are in black and white that I really enjoy. And it's an ode to every single one of those without having to all give individual credence to every single one. This scene was supposed to read a little bit more like friendly, but it comes off way more like douchey. So that's fine. That's kind of who the character is. And the song at the end. So I borrowed this CD. I bought a DVD from my friend Bo. And it was the Satanic Rites of Dracula, which is a public domain horror film. It's the 7th film, I believe, in the Hammer Dracula series. 7th or 8th, depending on if you count Brides of Dracula or the 7 Golden Vampires. It depends. So the thing is, they've got the CD that comes with the movie, because the movie is public domain and anybody can release that fucking movie. And that CD is like just full of all sorts of very wild music. Like there's death metal and there's rap and there's EDM and there's like very like melancholy country music, but it's all like has this gothic like vampire motif about it, or it mentions vampires or horror stuff or killing people in some way. And it's a fucking awesome CD. And like a few months, like the thing that like really got me into wanting to do this movie was watching all those Hammer Dracula films again, because I've always been a fan of them. But I was watching that movie and I listened to that CD up and back to work all the time. And this particular song really spoke to me as just a very cool vampire film. But it was like the epitome of what this character is, which is a merging of that gothic Victorian vampire with like the modern kind of more like underworld punk rock type vampire. That's what I wanted. Like and so Serena wearing that dress at the end of the movie is kind of more supposed to be like showing that she's very much a creature of two worlds, both the old world and the new world. And we'll get into more of that later, but yeah. So, thank you for watching my commentary track for Princess of Darkness, and we'll see you next time.